Rosie had the cutest laugh, the prettiest smile. She just had a cute personality. And she was my sister. She was my bratty sister that I picked on.
I don't know really what could have happened, who could have wanted to do something like that, come in to an apartment complex and come through the window and snatch a kid up.
It wasn't until the medical examiner looked at her did they realize that she was brutally sexually abused.
How could they be so cruel to do that to a young kid, than to do what they did to her? And go, how could somebody be like that?
Rosie Tapia, another victim in a wave of unsolved crime stories. Few clues to follow, families left shattered and broken, and communities knowing only that we have murderers living among us.
It was a child abduction from her window in the middle of the night with parents home.
The Salt Lake police say someone kidnapped 6-year-old Rosie Tapia from the bedroom of this apartment in West Valley City on August 12, 1995.
That's a rarity and a parent's worst nightmare.
Full of life.
After more tthan 20 years, her family still questions how it happened and if they could have somehow prevented it.
What did I do wrong? What didn't I pay attention to? Why, when I was watching her, did I walk by the person that was planning this, Why didn't I stay awake? Why didn't I leave the TV on? Because it seemed like as soon as we turned the TV on, that's when they strike, as soon as they knew we were all going to sleep. Why can't I just fall asleep? Why didn't I just go lay in the bed with them? There's a lot of things that I should have did, Maybe I should have let her sleep out in the living room with me. She would have been here, I should have just had like a little sleepover in the living room. Why did I,
Her family frantically searched for little Rosie and put out posters, but a jogger found her body later in the day next to the Jordan Canal.
Rosie Tapia's sister and family never believed her drowning was accidental. Her mother discovered Rosie missing just before 6 a.m. Sunday, the window of her bedroom open, screen removed. Now autopsy results reveal Rosie was probably sexually assaulted before drowning in the Jordan River Canal, where her body was discovered by a jogger.
We knew that Rosie wouldn't just climb out of the window at that late at night and just leave and go throw herself in the river, because we know she wouldn't do that.
The Salt Lake police searched the river and the neighborhood, questioned the family and several other suspects, but never found out who abducted, raped, and killed her. Her death shocked the Salt Lake community.
I want this guy caught because I'm scared that it might happen to my son or my daughter or my other son.
The erosion of lack of respect for human life.
Year after year, the family held visuals commemorating Rosie's death as police followed up on new leads.
Now with additional evidence that we've come up with, I think we're going to be doing some more of that, contacting other witnesses, doing some more background investigation on this whole thing, and looking at what evidence we have now closer.
But year after year, they came no closer to solving the case.
Now it gets in those little porous surfaces, like what's on the Barbie and her clothing and her hair. And it gets into those surfaces and it pulls out into those porous surfaces the DNA of whoever, may have been touching that clothing.
Recently, investigators began re-examining a Barbie doll someone left at Rosie's grave a few weeks after her funeral. Rosie's mother still grieves for the loss of her beautiful little girl and the tragic way someone ended her life.
I wanted to see my daughter, and they wouldn't let me see her. I had to wait 3 days to see her. And when I checked her body, I wanted to hold her and they wouldn't let me pick her up. But I knew that she suffered, but I didn't know exactly the type of injuries she had. until I read the medical report. And the more I read it, it just broke my heart that she had to suffer the way she did. And why would anybody want to hurt a little girl like that? I just can't understand that.
The family cannot let go until they find out who did it, and they feel that the police and the national news media failed them.
The one that sticks out in my mind the most is how bad the police did here versus Colorado with John Benet Ramsey. That happened shortly after what happened with Rosie, you know, and it just seemed like that got national, you know, out there nationally.
I truly believe that, you know, status will kind of keep you in the media's eye.
I mean, we even tried to get Rosie's case put on was Unsolved Mysteries, and the other one with America's Most Wanted. We tried getting Rosie, and they denied it because they said there wasn't enough facts there. And I don't know how much more facts you need. That, you know, there's still a killer out there.
But now, almost 24 years later, the Tapia family has new hope. A crew from Discovery produced a documentary on Rosie, and new DNA evidence could bring more clues.
Just how committed is your team to solving this case?
The bottom line is it's a 6-year-old that was taken from an apartment and murdered. Everyone is committed to this case.
The family hopes some media and publicity will push the story of Rosie's tragic murder back into the light and possibly bring some tip, clue, or evidence that can help them find closure. Rosie's family got together at Louine's house and sat around her TV to watch Paula Zahn retell the worst nightmare of their lives.
If anything can come out of this documentary is that if we could get a clue, anything, if anybody's heard anything or saw anything, even though it's been as long as it has, I mean, people remember things for some reason, something, deja vu, whatever, if they can call the local police, you know.
The hour-long documentary outlined the details of Rosie's kidnapping, rape, and murder, and brought new information about DNA and additional suspects that the family had never heard before, leaving them hopeful but cautious.
If we get a good amount of calls, then I'll be happy. But if nothing comes up, then I'm going to be sad, because it took a lot of effort to get this done.
Programs like this one have increased in popularity in recent years.
Killed? There's no wrong. You do it.
Fox News recently released a docudrama on murderer Charles Manson.
I want you to forget everything you think you know about that night, because I know the facts better than anyone.
And a made-for-movie about the O.J. Simpson murder trial. FX also did a season-long series about O.J., and Netflix just released a 4-part series on serial killer Ted Bundy.
He didn't look like anybody's notion of somebody who would tear apart young girls.
My name is Ted Bundy. I've never spoken to anybody about this.
I think we're seeing almost an explosion of true crime as a genre, where people are consuming these stories not just for the informational value, but also as entertainment.
Investigative reporter Dave Cawley hosts a podcast called Cold, each week where he explores the details surrounding the Susan Powell case, another unsolved Utah murder.
In this particular case, you have a mystery that's not been answered and not been solved. You have a woman who disappeared under suspicious circumstances, whose body has never been found. You have a man suspected of killing her husband, who was never charged with a crime and was never brought to court to answer for that crime in front of a jury. And it speaks to a breakdown of the system of justice. And so I think part of the intrigue or interest in telling a story like this is understanding why did the system fail.
Cawley thinks people want to watch and listen to unsolved crime stories to find out how the system failed, but also thinks it can help bring people to justice.
technology changes, and the tools available to investigators at the time crimes are committed sometimes are outdated by the time somebody comes back later. We've seen that with DNA evidence, we've seen that with computer forensic evidence, and sometimes it's a fresh set of eyes, right? Somebody who comes to a case, a story, with no preconceived notions about it. They might view evidence differently. They might have avenues to speak to witnesses who otherwise wouldn't have spoken before. So yeah, absolutely. I believe it's very important to keep these stories going.
But Colley admits it can be a two-edged sword. New information can help the police and the families of the victims, but it can also keep the pain and the sadness alive.
I think a lot of people who go through something so traumatic as losing a loved one to murder, they might not want to have that experience spread out, publicly for people to consume as entertainment. Understand that. On the other hand, in my particular instance, I've had members of the immediate family who have expressed gratitude for keeping the story in the public consciousness and sharing those details, because I think it can be difficult for them to hold out hope years and possibly decades later when it seems like nobody's paying attention to the story anymore.
The Utah legislature passed a bill called Rosies Law that requires law enforcement agencies in the state to share information about unsolved murder cases.
It will include all unsolved murders and disappearances more than 3 years old, which is the statutory definition of a cold case.
The families of dozens of victims of unsolved murders stood in front of the news media press conference, putting a face to the empty lives left behind the murderers who live among us.
Typically, a number of cases kind of maybe fall through the cracks in terms of things like rewards being made available. For the first time ever, rewards are now being offered in every single one of Utah's cold cases. There are more than 200 of them. The base award at this point for information that leads to a conviction or a conviction in our minds that the case has been solved is $3,000.
After more than 40 years, new DNA evidence helped police in California catch the Golden State Killer, a man who murdered more than 12 people.
The Golden State Killer, who terrorized California for decades. Investigators say they tracked him down using DNA and in a genealogy website.
There remains to this day, from what I can understand, at least a partial DNA sample, something, you don't know what. Don't know whether it was under her fingernails, if it was like mitochondrial, whatever the case may be, semen, but there's something there, but it was compromised by the water. Your evidence usually goes away. So it was just a really emotional setting, because there, first there was the frantic search and the hope that she'd be found, that she maybe just wandered away or taken off with someone, and then of course the thud of, no, this is not going to have a happy ending.
Investigators in Utah think new technology and help from the public could also bring closure to these families.
Several cold and old cases from the Salt Lake Valley region.
Sorensen Forensics recently helped police find a suspect involved in a decades-old murder case. DNA was found beneath Anna Palmer's fingernails, just like Rosie.
He didn't say exactly how many fingernails he had, but he said that it wasn't very good because when she was thrown in the water.
It's not impossible. DNA is a very robust molecule and it sticks around for a long time.
I know exactly what all these people are feeling and the hope that they have that their loved one will be reunited with them. And just anything that we can do, and like I said, we're all a nonprofit, anything we can do is much appreciated. And for the public, if they know of anything, please come forward with any information for these people.
After more than 23 years of wondering, Rosie Tapia's family still holds out hope that one day the person who did this will face justice and atone for the damage done to their family.
My girls, Rosie was in between my girls. So when she passed, it affected my kids. I mean, my son, my two daughters, I mean, they would not sleep in their room for 2 years. They were scared, and they're still scared. I mean, they live in an apartment building, they live on the 3rd floor because they won't live below. Even with my grandkids, I worry about them because they live in a complex, and I'm like, you know, don't let them play outside, don't let them do anything, you know, you be out there with them and whatnot, you know.
These things can happen no matter where you live. These things happen, and you have to be, you know, as vigilant as you can.
You just don't trust people.